In this video, I'll be covering in depth on each level of discipline and how to advance along it. Keep in mind that the skill level of discipline is only half of what makes you disciplined, but getting it right is what helps you build the other half and get you to become a hardworking person. On the first level, we kind of have the average person, and that's because we're not talking about how hard you work, as I mentioned, but how smart you are at building your discipline and how smart you are at working and using that discipline. So the average person relies on external systems to get them to do the work. So that'd be something like schools or work, uni. They pretty much never have a clear reason in the mind to self-improve and aren't really on a self-improvement journey unless they just watch some motivational videos, and then that just lasts for maybe minutes, maybe hours, maybe even days, but eventually it fades. I've also marked this level as unconscious incompetence. Now I'm guessing most of you watching this video aren't in the unconscious incompetence stage. You're more likely to be in the conscious incompetence stage, and I'll show you how to get to these stages later on in this video. On level 2, we have the internalized drive, where you actually have a reason to improve. You have a goal, a purpose of a type of person that you want to become. One of the signs of being on level 2 instead of level 1 is that you get back on track without needing something to happen. For example, you would try to study even though the deadline isn't that close yet. Or you'd sometimes put extra work in even though you don't have to. That's why instead of relapse lasting months or years until you pick up another motivational video to improve, relapse can only last week to days because you get back on track without needing something to happen. You start saying yourself, enough is enough, I want to be better. Now, to jump from level 1 to level 2, you obviously just have to work on your resolve. I've noted down some things here that you can do, and there is some extra things here. I made a video breaking down this chart. Now, as you start having a goal, a purpose, or a desire, something that you want to go towards and achieve, you're going to learn that there are systems or efficient ways to do it, or there are certain habits you can learn to improve your overall productivity each day, like journaling, meditation, etc., etc. And that's where level 3 comes in, where you start learning all of these knowledge and tools like app blockers, task lists, and every other habit that I've mentioned. Jumping from level 2 to level 3 is very, very simple. Start looking into the science and all of the productivity tricks that you can do to increase your discipline and get more work done each day more efficiently. Now, level 3 is where a lot of the self-improvement guys are naturally at. They're prone to cycling between hard work and relapse in days. They get better and better eventually at lasting for a little bit longer, but still keep relapsing and going back to scrolling in a couple of days, maybe weeks. You want to be disciplined, but progress seems very, very slow, and you wonder whether it's because you are not wanting it enough, or maybe it's because some kind of system or habit that you're missing, and you're partially correct. This is the work relapse loop from a video that I did a week ago. Every time you go back to work after scrolling, you have the initial feel-good loop where you feel good and there is a lot of progress getting done. That's because initially the tasks are not difficult. You will naturally have a lot higher energy from resting and from not doing work. You have a higher resolve as you will have higher desire. You would have most likely watched some motivational videos. You would have had higher motivation as there would have been most likely a bit of a clear deadline. So you would have had to do more tasks. You would have been under more urgency. You would have also not been getting that much dopamine from social media. What happens with the level 3s is that when they get to work initially from the relapse, maybe they might reset up like all the app blockers and task lists, but after a while they slowly discard them and they just keep working. That's an issue because by default all 3 of these slowly go down, and you may reset or have higher energy by getting good sleep and exercising, but not the other 2, especially resolve, where after a couple of days you will not be reminding yourself constantly of why you wanted to self-improve in the first place. You'll just be using that up to work hard. This comes to level 4, where you begin to pay attention to your inner feelings, and that's these 3 levers, which by the way is why you're doing this in the first place, how much you want to do the task, and how much energy you have to do the task, or in how good mood you are in general. At level 4, you begin monitoring each 3 of these levers and predicting whether you should take some time to increase increase those levers back up or whether you should continue working. Just as a reminder, if you continue working, all of these levers will naturally start to go down. So you will need to take some time out of your day when they're low to put them back up. So instead of forcing yourself to work, instead you just sit down for 5 minutes to measure how you feel about work. You have a look and measure all 3 of these levers, and you decide then whether to go ahead, spend some time resetting your energy, resetting and increasing these levers back up, or whether to continue working as it's not that hard of a task and you can manage it. Now at level 4, there's still quite a lot of mistakes that you can make and you can still relapse, mainly because you just don't have that much experience to know whether a certain lever should be that high or should be that low, and so you might just decide to work when it's low, it goes even lower and causes relapse. However, at this stage, relapsing or scrolling only lasts hours instead of days or weeks. That's because you don't burn yourself and keep pushing and pushing until your body is completely burnt out and needs to recover and put up all these levers for a couple of days. Instead, it's going to be a very, very small increment that just pushes you over the limit. Of course, at level 4, you'd also probably start looking into resetting and making relapse as short as possible. That's these points that I made here in the previous video. Now, level 4 is where you begin to be at the conscious competence stage. Because you are predicting and constantly paying attention to whether all of these levers are high or low enough, you will start to have a lot less relapses and you will just get used to days of work. Now granted, some days in the beginning you might just not work at all or barely work, and that's alright because you should allow yourself to do that, especially when you just quit social media, because during then your dopamine will go to the very bottom and so your energy will plummet, as I've put here. So naturally you'll just have a lot less resources to work with throughout the day. Now as a side note, you should be careful to not pay too much attention and be too worried that if you don't feel like working, you're gonna relapse. Level 5 is primarily the more experienced version of level 4, but it's also a lot more optimized to cost a lot less energy for paying attention to and trying to predict whether you can work or not. Because constantly paying attention to your thoughts costs a lot of energy. So a lot of level 5 is just setting up rules that if X happens, then I do Y. And then measuring those rules to make sure that they're the most productive rules and that you don't relapse. The 5-minute rule I mentioned earlier is one of those rules. And so after a while in level 5, you'll just be able to predict whether you should work or recover just based on all of the data. And relapse can still last minutes due to it just being purely accidental. Like if you're watching your competitors and top players on YouTube, seeing what videos succeed for them to make a better YouTube video, then it's bound to happen that you might just click on a video for a minute before realizing that, oh, I should get back to work. Now keep in mind, 5 through 7 are purely theoretical because I'd say I'm about 4.5, so I'm not there yet to fully understand and describe level 5 and the systems that go beyond it, but I am starting to paint a picture of this and the next couple of levels, because there might even be further levels that I haven't noted down. So to get from level 4 to 5, which I'm doing at the moment, it just requires a lot of reflection and starting to track data, just being smart and setting up rules so that the metacognition, paying attention to your feelings and trying to predict when you should be working and when you should be recovering, isn't costing you that much energy. You basically set up rules instead of just going by feeling. Level 6 is unconscious competence, and it's what the name describes. Compared to level 5, you don't really need rules anymore. You just know whether you should work or recover or not. You stay in the growth zone or the optimal stage where framing increases for so long that framing just naturally goes up to pretty much the very top. So this is the stage where a lot of us dream to be in, because you just don't need to put in effort anymore. You just are disciplined, and that just comes with more experience and just repeating the system over and over again until it's fully in your head. Now, the final level is called controlled indulgence. The idea of it is very simple. When you have framing so high, you really just don't need a lot of these other levers to be that high anymore. By default, as you start working more and more, your desire for work actually increases. You have more of a reason to work because you're gonna actually see a lot more rewards come from work automatically without having to put as much perceived effort anymore. So both resolve and framing become quite high after a while. That's why if you're not careful, you can actually burn out by completely burning out all of your energy. I know a guy who overworked himself to the point where he was taken to the hospital just because he worked so hard and never paid attention to the feelings. That's a result from high framing and high resolve. In my more updated chart, I will signify resolve as kind of this in between, or maybe a bit upper echelon that you want to be in, not at the very top, because if you have such a high reason to work to the point where you have no choice but to work, you're not going to recover and you're just going to burn out. You should have high energy as high as possible. Your framing will be really high and resolve will naturally be high already. The only way to make things harder is to have extremely low motivation, and one of the ways to lower motivation is to have higher dopamine for other options. That means something like maybe once a week for 1 hour, you go ahead and play your favorite game, and then you try to control the desire that leads for the following week. On top of getting all of the work done, you try and control the desire to go ahead and continue playing. Now I'll talk about why it's good to first make work as easy as possible and slowly progress towards working harder and harder before unleashing desire in the next part, because I myself used to believe that you shouldn't set up your systems to make it as easy as possible to work hard, because otherwise you're just not going to get used to working hard. And the belief isn't entirely wrong, but it's not entirely right either. You have to have a balance. And I'll cover this in depth plus a lot of other mistakes in part 2 of the series. To end the video, I want to go over the notes that I still haven't mentioned for this graph. So the first one is that there could still be other paths to increasing your skill level of discipline. Maybe you could have a big purpose, and then you start with controlled indulgence, and then you actually start into learning all of the habits, and then you start learning metacognition, yada yada. And there could also be some other path that takes you from level 2 to level 6 or to level 5 that skips number 3 and 4. I'm still largely figuring it all out, but what I can say is that this path is one of the paths that does work and get you to become disciplined. The other note is the idea of pain sprints, the idea that going through extremely difficult challenges and extremely difficult times quickly raises your framing and how much you can suffer each day. And that's partly true. It will increase your framing, but it'll also put you in the danger zone and most likely make you relapse. And when you relapse, you go back to the withering stage where you don't have anything hard and you wish every day was like this and you just enjoy the day and you do nothing, which worsens framing back down. I don't think that having extreme challenges are always bad. What I think is that this should be done very, very rarely, and that your main focus should still be to advance all of these levels and slowly take it to the point where you're always working to how much you can handle each day, because that'll quickly expand your discipline level by raising framing. So that's all for this video. If you have any questions, comment down below and I'll try to answer as many of them as I can.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, go.